Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit. It is a beautiful Wednesday, May 17th, 2023. We are sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Norris Howard.
Norris, it is not every morning where a freighter gets stuck in Belle Isle, my friend.
Yeah, I just recently saw that story. You brought it up right before we hit record today, and I took a look at it, and that is the first time I can recall that ever happening.
I mean, I've heard some rumors that it lost propulsion, which makes sense. The Coast Guard has not confirmed what the situation is as far as like what happened to it. It's still very early. We're recording this just a few hours after it happened, but it is a 639-foot long ship called the MV Mark W. Barker. It's only a year old, and it makes me think about technology. And you know how like you buy something new and it either fails right away or it fails much later? This feels like the case with this ship that's apparently carrying salt.
I feel like they bought that ship on like Shein or Amazon or something, or like Wish. It's like the Wish.com version of a freighter.
I always have loved freighters ever since I was a kid. I would like get the timetables from the paper and go down to the park and watch them go by. But this is going to be a bit of an ordeal. These things are kind of complicated. Have you ever been up close to one of these freighters?
Yeah, I have when I was much younger. With all large boats, you kind of don't understand just how large they are until you're standing right next to one.
Yeah. A few years ago, I actually got the chance to go on the J.W. Westcott, the mail boat, and be in the tugboat or the whatever it is. I don't know if it's a tugboat's the proper term, but you go right up to the ship. You got to power through the waves, and then it sucks right to it. There's like tires on the side of the little boat, and then they take a hook down and load the mail up, and then the pilot, because apparently when you go through this section of the Great Lakes, you actually have to bring on like a local pilot to guide you. That transition happens, and it's crazy when everybody's moving, the water's splashing, and you're like sucked by force right next to this thing. I can't say I was scared, but I was definitely, let's just say, concerned, because, it's not like the J.W. Westcott has not sunk before.
Right, exactly.
So let's get into some news.
Sure.
There is an announcement that there will be an EV corridor from Quebec all the way to Kalmazoo. I know Kalmazoo is a city near and dear to your heart and your family. I think it's important to note that this focus, I think it's more than 860 miles or so of road, so that there can be charging the whole way through between the United States and Canada. I think there's a couple things. I think, one, it's good to see investment. I think also, number two, it kind of highlights the needs we still have for electric vehicle charging.
Yeah, 1,000%. And what I really love about this isn't so much just the investment into the infrastructure, but also really trying to do more to kind of connect West Michigan to the rest of the state, especially Southeast Michigan. Obviously, you have I-94, which is the main stretch in which these charging stations will go on. But one thing that I really, really appreciate besides that also is that this will extend all the way to not just Toronto, but all the way to Quebec. So for those of you who are unfamiliar sort of with Canada past Toronto, Quebec is still quite a ways, but with an electric vehicle, it's virtually impossible to make that drive. And really, for a lot of electric vehicles, even driving to Kalamazoo will drain half the battery. So having these charging stations in between these two cities, I think is fantastic. You'll be able to get to Montreal on this highway. You'll be able to go virtually anywhere in Michigan between Kalamazoo and Detroit. I think it's fantastic. And really, at this point, if you live in Southeast Michigan, now I really don't see any barriers to why you wouldn't want an EV. And on top of that, it further goes into supporting kind of the efforts being put forth by, Ford and so on to get Detroit to be sort of a EV mobility hub, because I've gone to other states and, recently, in other large cities recently, and I can't say that the EV infrastructure in a lot of those other cities, especially on the East Coast, is that much better. So to see this level of investment, I think is fantastic.
What I was surprised by, and maybe just because I didn't pay attention at first, but 10% of Canada's vehicles are zero emissions. And when you start to put into context all the EV transitions, I know we have a lot of listeners who are like, well, the EV transition, it's going too fast or some other things. You realize in those foreign markets, that some of those things are really starting to make changes. I mean, I know that there are big changes happening in the Chinese markets. Part of the issues, frankly, that some of the big three are having in China is because their local electric brands are coming in cheaper, and they're investing a ton in electric. And I look at it and I go, I feel like we have to be on the cutting edge of this kind of stuff, especially to keep our Motor City title, because there's more and more of the auto industry that's been distributed, not just around the country, but around the world. And if we don't have the infrastructure, it's going to be hard for people to adopt. Like, I love the idea of this corridor, but then I also think about the fact that I will be going to the Mackinac Policy Conference in a few weeks, and I know a few people who are a little hesitant about, like, could I make it all the way to Mackinac City from Detroit, because that's a little bit longer without, like, a significant delay in charging. And a friend of the show, Gabrielle Coppola, who writes for Bloomberg, recently tweeted out a whole thing about how they've had some issues trying to make it. It needs to be as easy as finding a gas station. I think that's the biggest challenge that we have, is that charging your car needs to be as easy as a gas station. You shouldn't need to open an app and figure out, like, well, which charger is fast, which one is slow, which one is this. Like, you should just be able to go up and charge. And I think that is one of the biggest barriers to more widespread adoption, especially in states like Michigan, where, look, this is a geographically huge state.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a really important thing. And on your point about the Chinese and Canadian markets, you know, it's one of those things where I look at GM's decision to end the production of the Bolt. It blows my mind that was ever a decision that company can make in order to focus on making EV pickup trucks. I think that is absolutely asinine, personally.
Really? Okay, let's talk about it, because to me, I feel like they're just trying to sell EVs that are like the SUVs and pickup trucks that they already sell, as opposed to optimizing for, like, an EV market.
They need to make cars people can afford. Okay. And the thing is that when you're talking about EVs, which already are going to come in at a higher sticker price than combustion engines, you need to be able to make a car that people will, one, be able to afford, two, is attractive enough to buy, and three, doesn't come necessarily with all the stuff that a pickup truck will come with. There is a reason why everybody doesn't drive a pickup truck, because everybody doesn't need one. The way I feel about it is that if you're somebody like me who, you know, we're a small family, it's just myself and my partner, or even if we just had one kid, we have no need whatsoever for a pickup truck. And most people don't. And so even if they expanded on it and do what they're doing with, like, the EV Blazers, and I want to call it the Trailblazer, but they're the Equinox, right? Those are two things that are coming out that I think will sell well, but that still doesn't account for the single person, the person who's fresh out of college, or this is got their first major job, or it's the first car that they're buying. That's the market, I think, that the Bolt could have been in, where you want people's first cars to start being electric vehicles. You want people to start trading in their smaller vehicles for the Bolts. And I don't know if there's sales data that I don't have, that they probably do, that factored into that decision. But for me, when it comes to small families, young professionals, and that cohort of people, I'm not seeing us going out to buy pickup trucks, whether they be EV or combustion or not. So I think that is something that is incredibly short-sighted. And also, to speak to your infrastructural concerns, those take more energy to move. So if we're already having issues with being able to go from one side of the state to the other one, or from north to south, if we're talking about driving all the way to Mackinac, your range on a pickup truck is going to be shorter than on a, you know, small SUV or hatchback or anything like that. So for me, making that decision doesn't necessarily help the situation in terms of converting people into EV drivers.
Couple of thoughts on that. I think this is a brand strategy play. I think that some automakers, and Ford's clearly one of them too, General Motors, are abandoning the small market, like the small car market. I think they're sitting in their mind, instead of having a car for every person, but because for years you had an entire suite of cars from beginning to end in Ford or beginning to end in General Motors, I think the future is, if you want a truck, you buy a Ford or a Chevy. And I think that's strategically where they're saying, okay, we can make the most profit here. This is going to be the focus area. And I think what may happen is those younger professionals, we're going to find out if this marketing strategy works, because I think those younger professionals are going to pick other brands that enter the market. I think it's a very hard position for the big three to defend, to have such a high price point for these vehicles and it be the only solution. Now, I know that cars are more expensive now and all that other stuff, but I do worry about that because car affordability is something for a lot of people. Or is it a world, like, we don't really know the world of used EV cars yet, right? Like, we don't really understand what that looks like. I don't see a lot of those older EVs on the road. And I think that's part of the whole idea of like, okay, we make a car like a phone and you turn it in or you lease it. They talk about all these subscription services. And I wonder, like, from a brand strategy point of view, long term, will it be wise to be like, okay, you know what? If you want a Ford or a GM, you're going to be getting a pickup truck or whatever. If you want a sedan, you get a Toyota or you get a Kia or you get a whatever, which will probably be a foreign automaker.
I just think that's so foolish. I just really think it is. Like, obviously that may fly in Michigan where we do have winter and so on and so forth. So that could be also a part of the calculus, but that's just Michigan. We're not talking about California. We're not talking about the East Coast. We're not talking about, you know, Washington, D.C. or Atlanta or you know, Georgia. We're not talking about those markets where, yeah, people drive trucks, but people also drive cars. There's a reason why the Toyota Camry is the most driven car in America, right?
Well, we forget that around here because we don't see them as much, but you look at the data, you go to California and stuff like that, it's Toyota.
Yeah, and it's because they're small and they're cheap. That's why.
And they run a long time.
And they tend to not break down. So if we're talking about, you know, like with this story and talking about EVs and talking about investing in this sort of EV culture to be able to get people to get these vehicles, I don't see a pickup truck being the conversion point because, at least for me out here in the western suburbs and also in the western part of Detroit where, you know, majority of my family still lives, I'm not seeing EV pickup trucks. I don't see them. If I see an EV, I'm seeing a Tesla or I'm seeing a Bolt. That's what I see.
Every once in a while, I'll see a Lightning. That leads me to the point when I talk to contractors, because a lot of my family's blue collar, like window washers and roofers and stuff like that. Not a single one of them are going to ever buy an EV pickup truck. When it comes to work, you know, the delivery vans, I totally could see, like with the Rivians and Amazon and all that other stuff, where you have set routes and you know where you are. You can set up charging points. I think about my family who's going to go wash windows. They don't know where they're going to be. Like, they need to haul around gear. When you start hauling things, like you put a fifth wheel on an EV truck, your range goes to heck pretty quick.
Exactly. And that's sort of the lack of calculus, I think, went into it. I think they saw that the sales numbers for the Bolt probably was not what they wanted it to be. But I don't think replacing that with a pickup truck solves those issues, or even the crossovers that they're putting out, I don't think solves those issues. Now, if what they're saying, which this is not what they're doing, but if we lived in a reality where they're saying we're getting rid of the Bolt and we're going to bust down the Equinox to be the price of a Bolt. So basically you could get an SUV for the price of a, you know, mid-range sedan. Then I think, oh, snap, that would be fantastic. But that's not what we're talking about. So for me, if we're talking about Detroit, that's still the population center, regardless of how much we want to talk about it. Obviously, the suburbs have a lot of population, but if we're talking about the population centers, most people still to this day are not willing to drop that kind of money down for EVs. And I really think that the Bolt was a major step in the right direction. But really, in my opinion, from talking to a lot of my friends and a lot of folks my age, which is, you know, in our early to mid 30s, they didn't buy Volts because they couldn't. Not because they couldn't afford it. The inventory was so low, they couldn't get batteries, they couldn't get parts. So that kind of falls on Chevy, not necessarily on the consumer base. So still, this decision baffles me. I love the fact that we're investing more into EV. Hopefully that converts more people. But to your point, until we get to a reality where we can drive from Detroit to Kalmazoo, to Grand Rapids, to Mackinac, to virtually anywhere in the state you will want to drive and know that you could charge your car in less than 30 minutes, we will not be fully there yet.
We talked about Quebec for a second. Here's a story that I'm bringing into town because it's not happening here, but I think because we are such a streets and car obsessed place, and we also have a lot of listeners into transit and walkability, all that other stuff. In Brossard, Quebec, across the St. Lawrence River from Montreal, they are now doing a traffic light that changes green only if you are within like a parameter of the speed limit. So if you are speeding, that light will stay red until which point you slow down. And so the idea here is to help calm traffic because fines are after the fact. People get mad at fines. Fines sometimes can be hard to collect. Fines are something where you get it either whether it's a license plate camera like they are doing in Detroit and some other places in Metro Detroit. It comes after the fact. This is something where, all right, you got to match a speed limit or get close to it, and then the light will turn green. What do you think about that? And I wonder if it's kind of a crafty way to accomplish something with speeding, which, I enjoy going fast, but I don't enjoy going fast in neighborhoods. And it's very personal to me because there's a lot of speeders where I live, and there's seeming to be nothing we can do about it. We're putting in street bumps, like traffic calming bumps and things like that. But like we have a road nearby that is for some reason 30 miles an hour, for historical reasons 4 lanes long, and it just invites people to speed. I feel like this is the kind of thing that's like, oh, okay, well, now it's a red light.
What I've seen of this technology is its usage is primarily, or at least the context in which they present it in, is mostly around school zones, which I think is absolutely fantastic to do. We already had a major problem with speeding in the city of Detroit to a point where it's not really enforceable. But also, we just have a culture of like red light running in Metro Detroit. All right, like that's just what we, no cop,
Red's
no
a
stop.
yield.
Yeah, a red is a yield for a lot of folks. And, to me, on paper, on the surface, this is a good idea, especially if I think the timing of the light is connected to your speed. Because that's the main thing for me, is that if you have a light that isn't timed properly, then what you just do is you create another traffic choke point, which makes even more people angry than, the speed bumps, I think. So if you time the lights to the speed, you get people to come to a complete stop, you get people to go through the light carefully, then I think we're in a place where it's pretty good. And to be perfectly honest, maybe this is a way that we can start thinking about traffic lights to be smarter and be more intelligent and kind of move along with the flow of traffic, because I don't know about you, Jared, but there are plenty of lights in the city of Detroit that either need to not be lights or need to be significantly faster.
I mean, across Metro Detroit, that's a reality.
Yeah.
Especially in those areas that are growing real fast and the infrastructure has not caught up to all the homes being built around there. Like we all know, like you go into some of the outburbs and it can be just like traffic chaos.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I really think that this is a good idea at face value. Obviously, I haven't seen the implementation for myself in person.
Want to go to Brossard, Quebec? Sounds like fun.
Listen, I'll go for a minute, and then we're hopping right back over the river to go to Montreal. So.
Yes. So, well, my dad was born in Montreal, so.
Fantastic.
Yeah, there you go. This makes me think of another story I want to talk about, that the city of Detroit, the police department, all of that, they want to add 100 more license plate readers around the city. There are more than 80 currently. The idea is that this captures license plate numbers and makes of models to try to track stolen cars and some other things. But there's a lot of pushback about a lot of surveillance in the city of Detroit. With the limited availability of cops, and cops can't be everywhere. And honestly, if you want my honest opinion, like I don't think they should be everywhere in like a functioning, like you shouldn't have to have a place crawling with cops, right?
Right, exactly.
This is something where using technology to try to spread out like the eyes of the city. And this is whether it's Project Greenlight, which is also a controversial thing, again, because of the unlicensed gas station that's a Project Greenlight partner, where a bunch of customers actually got killed because the guy who was being robbed locked the doors and locked the customers in there. And that's going to be a hot issue to follow. Councilmember Callaway has already raised some questions about it, about the decision of that gas station owner who, by the way, he was in a bulletproof glass area himself, right? Of course.
Yeah.
But the idea of like the surveillance state to try to help make Detroit safer, I don't know if long term this is the way to go. I know that a lot of companies do it. I know that there's a lot of like official Detroit push for green light and for license plate cameras. I'm kind of torn on this because I don't know if just adding more surveillance actually gets us where we need to go. I wonder how much of it, and I'd love to talk to an expert, how much of it is security theater? Like I think about that with the airlines too. Like when we travel, how much of this is security theater where it's like, oh, there's there so it makes us feel good versus Like, does this actually catch people? Because, I shared this on Twitter the other day or the other week, and I think you saw it too, where it's like, yeah, they're still doing donuts outside the house. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, it tells other people, oh, we're implementing these things. Or the new metal detectors that are throughout downtown. I've seen some Instagram stories around that on the weekends where people are just, you got to go through metal detectors for certain areas. I don't know if that actually solves the problem. I feel like those are Band-Aids.
I feel like they are Band-Aids. I am also torn on it, but I think I lean more pro, only because as someone, like yourself who's lived many, many years in the city, I think Detroiters, unfortunately, for a lot of us, have a too close of a relationship, unfortunately, with like lawlessness. And what I mean by that is that because of our lack of resources, because of our lack of enforcement, and I mean, uniformed officers, and to your point, I don't think anybody wants uniformed officers on every corner. That just sounds like a police state, essentially. But I think placed in proper areas, this can actually be a positive thing. Here's why I say that. Is because if you read through the proposal for what is actually being put forth by the chief of police or the office of the chief of police, what you see is it has 5 points that it is specifically targeting. Number 1, auto theft. Number 2, the apprehension of suspects and fugitives. Number 3, locating Amber Alert vehicles, investigations of serious crimes, and also crime analysis. So what we're talking about is exactly what you said, Jer. Somebody gets involved in a shooting at a gas station or at some other area. They have a description of the vehicle, and they're able to say, all right, what was the make and model of the vehicle? We could turn the cameras on and look for this vehicle and see where this person is. Inherently, I don't think that's an issue. And I think if you read further within the document, it also says it was explicitly prohibited to take still photos of individuals to enforce traffic or to track in individuals' movements outside of a vehicle. So what that's telling me, this is not a system by law, how they're writing this, that is going to be used to surveil individuals, right? Which is the worry for everybody. And I get it. There's the slippery slope and all this other stuff.
Well, there needs to be a check and balance here.
Yes.
Right? The worry is that once you have the camera tool, you get Joe over there who's just like, I want to track my ex-girlfriend.
Yeah, but I mean, that is what internal affairs, and that's what what an oversight committee is supposed to be for. I would be in favor of that. I would be in favor of, if we're going to expand this type of technology, that this technology would have some sort of oversight committee or something that would be able to hold those who are using the cameras accountable. And the thing about it to me is that we're talking about a context in which we would be able, and when I say we, I mean the city of Detroit, would be able to better track down serious crime offenders. And I don't understand why that sounds like a bad thing to people.
Well, I mean, consistently, if you look at the end results of decisions by the mayor's office and council, it generally, there is a loud opposition to a lot of things, but generally the chips fall in that favor, right? They generally fall in that favor in the city because at the end of the day, this city looks at security as a very high priority.
And I think, one last point that I want to say is that, obviously, I feel like there's a natural pushback, a natural opposition to expansions of police forces and expansions of law enforcement, but also at the same time, and this is how I feel, as a native of a city of majority Black people, I feel like those people should also feel the right to be protected. They should feel like they should be able to walk around their neighborhoods. They should feel like there should be nothing inherently wrong with going to the gas station at 9 p.m. But we all know that that's a silly thing to do in the city of Detroit, unless you're very familiar with that neighborhood. And I grew up in a neighborhood where it maybe is not the smartest idea, right? So, I feel like anything that can make my family that lives in a lot of these neighborhoods feel safer, I'm for it. And that's how I will always feel about it. Now, obviously, we can talk about implementation, oversight, making sure that people don't abuse such a power. But at the same time, the citizens of Detroit deserve to feel safe.
So, Norris, last night I got my chance to go to Comerica Park for the first time since the pandemic. Honestly, I'll admit, I was kind of excited. Like, although the Tigers have been kind of down lately, they're playing a little bit better this year. And yeah, like I'm somebody who spent my first 20 some years of life knowing Tiger Stadium and my last 20 years so of life knowing Comerica Park. And yeah, I still like a good ball game, and I still like to be out there and enjoy things. And I got a lot of thoughts. When's the last time you've been to the ballpark?
I went to a game in summer 2019, right before the pandemic. So
okay,
I don't want to say recently, but recently as far as sports goes.
So a couple of things, like on the field, I really enjoyed the speed up of the game. I don't know how much you watch baseball on the television, but it was apparent watching the game that the pitch clock helped. Like having things with a actual clock that you could see out in the outfield, it helped everything just move faster. Like the attendance wasn't huge. The people tried to do the wave. It was more of a ripple. But there's been a lot of talk lately that we need to do a bunch of work to Comerica Park, that Comerica Park, it's hitting that 25-year lifespan now. And is it time to give it a facelift? I think to start this conversation, nobody's talking about replacing Comerica Park because I think that would be absolutely silly. Like it's nowhere near that point, and I think that would be a complete waste of money.
Yeah, and to be fair, I actually 1,000% agree. I think, first of all, Comerica Park was built at a time where the league was kind of going through certain things. And first of all, Comerica Park is huge. The field itself is huge, right?
Yeah.
So I think already it just feels so expansive compared to other parks, especially you go to Yankee Stadium, you go to Fenway, you go to any of these other stadiums on the East Coast, PNC in Pittsburgh or whatever. All of these parks feel significantly more contained. And what that does is it actually makes the experience feel more intimate. There are moments, and I'm sure you felt this way, Jer, where unless the place is packed, Comerica is cavernous, right?
Yeah.
It is absolutely sparse, right? But I think by rethinking some of the layout, especially of the concessions and adding a few more attractions within the park, I think there are some ways to sort of update it, right? Because it's getting a bit long in the tooth, as they say. I still think it's a good park, but it has always been a good park. As someone who's been to many ballparks across the country, it pales in comparison in vibe to even some of the newer parks.
There we go. That's what's missing. I think structurally, it's fine. Some people were saying, oh, it's kind of like needs whatever, more paint, whatever. Maybe in a couple areas, but structurally, it seemed absolutely fine. It is cavernous. Yesterday's attendance, I think, I just looked up what you were talking, a little over 16,000 people, which, by the way, is a low number.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there were some times last year where Detroit City FC, with their much smaller facility, outdrew the Tigers. So, like, the fan interest really needs to get up there. I think that'll happen if the Tigers continue to win more. Like, this town rewards winners. Like, yes, outside of the Lions, this town rewards winners. If you're the Lions, you can sell out everything. But if you're not winning, Detroit sports fans just don't show up in person. They'll watch on TV, but they won't show up in person. Just not as much, because the numbers just show that. Because they want to be a part of history. They want to be a part of things. But I went through those concourses, and I agree with some criticisms out there that I have heard. I think one was on 97.1, some others, where it's like, yeah, I remember those displays from 20 years ago. I took some pictures. They're dog-eared. Like, they need an update. Like, some of the signage looks sun-beaten at this point.
Yeah.
But these are all minor things. Like, these vibes could be fixed with investments in signage, with laying out the concessions better, like you said, with bringing up, like, a little bit of more, like, light and airiness into what's happening. I just think that it needs tweaks. I don't think it needs, like, it's not the end of the world for Comerica. There's other maintenance items, too. Here's a weird one. You're going to think I'm crazy. I was leaving the ballpark, going out with engineer Randy, looked up, and those tigers with the baseballs in their mouth?
Yeah.
Every single one of them, the bottoms are just covered in bugs from, like, the light. Every single one of them, like the bottom quarter. Just send somebody to clean out the tiger balls.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think that makes you crazy. I think, we're talking about just general maintenance.
Right.
And that's a lot of the stuff that does need to be done. And, for me, like, I look at Comerica Park, right? And I'm looking at some images now of just how the park itself is laid out. And what's missing, obviously, you have the ivy in the batter's eye in center field, right? And you have the sort of the statues kind of left of center, right? Other than that, there's not a distinct thing about the park that it has that makes you go, what is that over there? Like, I want to go check that out. Like, you know, the Marlins have that super ugly sculpture thing that they have that people hate it, but it's distinct, right? And I think there are some things that you'd be able to do. Like, I don't know, put another bar on top of the batter's eye if you can, or, you know, maybe push some of the seating near the dugouts back a little bit and offer maybe some box seating or more of like a VIP kind of experience, kind of like what they did at Little Caesars Arena, where there's like a bar club right there behind the basket. There are some interesting things that you can do at this ballpark because it is so large, but the biggest thing to me that you need to change, and people are going to say, oh no, you can't take that away, is get rid of the stupid baseball Ferris wheel.
Oh no, you want the Ferris wheel gone? Oh no.
Get rid of it and redo that entire food court area. The carousel and all that stuff, like, that's just not, it's not hitting. I don't think I've seen a kid use that carousel in 10 years, right? So, like, get rid of that whole idea
like
right
the
there.
big cat court there with the the carousel, and then there's also the Ferris wheel.
Yeah, and rethink that whole court area. Like,
I walked through there yesterday, and it did look tired. It really looked tired, and there was a bunch of empty stuff on the second level. I don't know if they're offices or whatever. Like, it just is tired, you know?
Yeah, you know what you could put there? Batting cages. Like take that second floor area and like put something cool there. Like, I don't know, like, you know, virtual batting cages or something like that. Like, rethink the entirety of the attraction part of the park. And I think you'll be able to solve a lot of these problems, because what exists now is leaning, I think, a little bit too heavily on the fact that the Tigers are this sort of nostalgic legacy baseball brand. But we haven't won enough to be able to do that, right? The Yankees and the Red Sox, they could do that. The Cubs, they could do that. We can't do that. You know, I feel like you rethink the attractions, put some updated stuff in that Big Cat Court area, maybe even some new concessions in general. And, you know, maybe you'll be able to breathe a little bit of new life into the park, but it does need a little bit of a facelift. I think the most significant thing in recent years has been the big screen is now a LCD when it was a CTR or whatever, the tubes. That's the biggest thing that they've done in the past decade, and that's kind of sad.
I would love to hear all of your thoughts about Comerica Park, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Now, before I let you go, I want to talk about 3 events coming up, one this weekend and then a couple up ahead in your schedule. First off, Flower Day is this Sunday in Eastern Market. It is a huge event for the region, coming down to one of my favorite places in Metro Detroit. Unfortunately, I do not believe that Supino Pizza will be open because of the fire that happened. But outside of that, there's a lot of interesting things in this market. You know, we've talked about before on this show about how it'd be great to see it be more of a 24/7 market and all that other stuff. That isn't like today's talk. Today's talk is all about Flower Day. What are your favorite Eastern Market spots or favorite Eastern Market thing, Norris?
Oh, man. Actually, is the design festival where there's they used to do all the murals and stuff. I'm very much so like all for the artsy fartsy stuff that's in the Eastern Market. I can't recall the last time I went to Eastern Market and actually bought produce, even when I lived in Lafayette Park and all I had to do was go up the DeQuindercut to get to it. We still only went kind of when there was special events going on at Eastern Market. And I actually think they should lean more into that and do more things at Eastern Market just as an outdoor third space, if you will, because the businesses, I think, will really benefit from it. And also, I just think it's just such a cool area of the city that they could do more of it. So that's probably my favorite. But my mom loves Flower Day, so I'm sure she'll be out there.
Look for Norris's mom somewhere out there. Just start asking people, are you Norris's mom? And then see eventually you can find them. No, I mean, Eastern Market's going to be getting a lot more residential units, and there are plans to move some of the industrial space into kind of an expanded version of Eastern Market, because there's been a lot of land that's been cleared out and opened up around it with the idea of building it into more of like a neighborhood. I don't know if I have a favorite, but I do know I'll be getting coffee because I need caffeine to sort through all of it. I'm a little different than you. I actually go get the produce when I can. If I'm down there, I always come back with something, especially if you can get like a good eggplant or something like that, depending on the season. Something seasonal. There's nothing better than like seasonal produce from a farmer's market and the whole vibe of Eastern Market. But you're right. The Eastern Market vibe is brought in a large sense by the artists and all that stuff. So make sure to check it out. I'll also mention that the Southwest Greenway opens May 24th. There is a celebration from 2:30 to 7 p.m. This is a great thing to see this project move forward. Greenways are going to be the signature, I think, of kind of Metro Detroit and Detroit. And to see this project actually come to fruition is a great thing. I'll make sure to link to the event in the show notes. The official address or event is 2209 Bagley, and there'll just be a lot going on. So I just wanted to make sure to mention that. Any Greenway thoughts before I move on to our final thing?
Nah, man, love Greenways. I think it's a fantastic idea. If you ever been to the High Line in Manhattan, that basically functions as a Greenway, a former rail line that was turned into sort of a pedestrian path. Fantastic. Love to see it. Can't wait until they all connect. Like you should be able to go around the whole city on just Greenways. I think that would be fantastic.
And then finally, and I got to mention this because we will be there at Ferndale Pride. More information is out now. Saturday, June 3rd, the street fair will run from 12:30 in the afternoon to 10 p.m. There will be more than 200 vendors. There will be a children's area. There will be music, DJs, all the things in downtown Ferndale, right there in that like Woodward and 9 Mile area. There'll even be smart shuttles from Ferndale High School and a couple of other points. So you want to go check that out on the Ferndale Pride website. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure to mention and remind people. And if you want to come say hi, look for the flower arch. We will be there for Ferndale Pride. All right, Norris Howard, thank you for spending a Wednesday with me.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It won't be the last time.
I'm sure not. You can follow Norris over at Great Laker Nori on Twitter and, wherever on the social medias. If you've got feedback, as always, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Thank you to our members on Patreon, patreon.com/dailydetroit, for helping keep this thing going. It's absolutely crucial. With that, I'm Jairus Days.
And I'm Norris Howard.
Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.